Greetings and welcome back to Aural Mess for our second episode. I'm joined tonight by Reagan Bussey. Reagan, thanks for joining. And do you want to introduce
Thank you for
yourself?
having me. I'm Reagan Bussey. My day job is I'm a radio DJ, and I work for two different radio stations, a corporate one. So it's not as free, but then I work at my college radio station where I have my own show, and it's a lot of fun. I get to curate the music, do requests, talk to listeners. So that's a lot of fun. And the college one doesn't pay well, but it's a creative freedom kind of thing. Can't put a price on that.
No, absolutely not. So what sort of music do you play on the corporate show, and what sort of stuff do you spin on the college side?
So the corporate one, it's an AOR rock station, and then at the college station, it's just 70s and 80s, no matter the genre or the artist. But with the corporate one, we have to play, like Van Halen, Metallica, that kind of stuff. But then I'll play like Sparks or Roxy Music on the college station, just something a little different.
Sure. No, it sounds cool. I had a college station, college radio show back in the day, like '89 back in the day. So lot different, but it was fun. And I had like I was the new guy, so I had the really awful shift. I think my shift was like 6 to 10 a.m. on Sunday morning, so nobody listened, and I could do whatever I wanted, say whatever I wanted within reason, and play whatever I just felt like playing. And they just had this massive record library at the time, and they had small shelf full of CDs because that was just sort of to become a thing. But I used to just go dig in the stacks and find something I never heard of before and just play it. Like sort of just discover things right alongside
Yeah.
my listeners.
Mm-hmm.
And then
That is cool.
I used to also, oh yeah, I used to fill in for other shows, sort of pinch hit for people if somebody had a hangover or they just needed to go to a party and didn't want to do their night shift or whatever. And I did everything from, I think I did a punk show one time, I did a metal show. Got a lot of grief for that because metal was just not my genre at that point in my life, and they were playing like really deep, dark metal, like death metal stuff, and I just wasn't into it. So I didn't know what I was playing. The guy left me like a 10-song list, and beyond that, I had to fill in 2 more hours. So I was like getting phone calls like, "Why are you playing this? This is awful." But
Yeah.
anyway, it was a good time.
So what do
So,
you do
yeah, I
now?
mean-
What do you? Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
What do you do for a living?
So I'm actually a technology director for an arts organization.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, so I've been doing that for a long time. I've been with the organization that I'm with now for just over 10 years, and it's great. It's real fun.
That is cool.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we talked about in the lead up to recording tonight was playlists and mixtapes, right? Because I think you being a DJ and just me being a music geek all my life, it's one of the best forms of self-expression, and it just is so rewarding to put together a banging playlist nowadays. Like even
Yeah.
still, like I'll just sit there and be like, wow, these 2 songs would really go well together, and then I kind of just flesh it out and build from there. So what was your earliest experience and your earliest memories of making mixes in whatever format they were?
My dad was real big into like burning CDs. So probably when I was a kid, that was one of the first experiences that I had. We had, one of those things that you put CDs in, and it's like it zips up. I don't know what the CD cases, and they would just be filled with different albums that my dad had ripped off of online and stuff that we had made. And so that was probably my earliest experiences. I was a little too late for the cassette thing, but I did that later in life. I have a JVC double deck cassette player, so I actually have a mixtape that I made last summer. I guess we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But then, of course, when Spotify and Apple Music became a thing, I would create playlists. But I didn't become a real big playlist person until recently. I was very much listen to the album, listen to one particular artist at one time. So that's been my experience with making mixes and playlists.
That's so cool. And the fact that you said that, like, you're an album person, you don't find that so much anymore. Like, you know,
Hmm.
especially with a lot of artists nowadays, that they're not making albums, right? They're just putting out singles, or just, you don't even call
Hmm.
them singles anymore,
Yeah.
just songs. So when, you know, listening to an album and sort of digging into that artist's vision and, you know, how they wanted to sequence everything and how they have it laid out, I think it enhances the experience, you know?
I think so too. Yeah, like when I get into an artist, I just listen to their. That's how I got into Steely Dan. Whenever I'd heard like Glamour Profession, and I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. I have to go listen to all their music. So I started at the top, listened to Can't Buy a Thrill all the way through, and just went through each album in order.
Nice. And the funny thing is, Steely Dan's, I think, a kind of bad example of the whole album sequencing thing, because if you read old interviews with them, they're like, we don't make albums. We write songs and we put things together, you know, based on tempo, or, you know,
Yeah.
how it feels. Like, you know, there's no story to be told. Every
Hmm.
song stands alone, right? So it's kind of funny, but that's interesting.
Yeah, like it's fun listening. I'm a huge Queen was like the first band that I ever really got into without the influence of my parents. And so Queen 2 is like a good example of you got to listen to that album from start to finish because they bleed over into the next song. Same with Dark Side of the Moon. So I love albums that do that and kind of continuously become one large song. And it really has a theme to it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that too. And it's funny you
Hmm.
mentioned Queen, because back in 1980, when Another One Bites the Dust came out, I was 8 years old and I was obsessed with that song. And it was one of the first LPs that I bought with my allowance money. You know, I think the Xanadu soundtrack was actually my
Yeah.
first, and I think Queen was my second. So, putting that on and listening, just that whole song sequence, it was one of the
Hmm.
first Queen albums, I think, where they used synthesizers, or I
Yeah, it
think it was
was.
the first
Hmm.
album. Yeah, and
That's
it
so
just blew me
funny.
away.
The first LP that I ever bought was the game also.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, the
That's
game
crazy.
and Dire Straits' debut album were the first two records that I ever bought.
Nice. What's your collection like nowadays?
Um, it's a lot of just different things that I find at thrift stores on eBay. I think I have like 300 records now. I've got some I've got cassettes and I've got a bunch of singles that I don't listen to, so they're just decoration at this point. But yeah, it's
Yeah,
just
they're more trouble than they're worth.
yeah, way more trouble. And like if I had a jukebox, my dream is to own a jukebox and put all of the singles in there, but that kind of it's so expensive to try and find it, or at least one that's in working order. I
Yeah,
mean, who
and trying
works
to
on
maintain that
jukeboxes
thing.
anymore? Yeah, exactly.
Right. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, that'd
But
be
yeah.
cool. It's funny. I went that direction too. Like, you know, I everything was physical media. At one point, I had like, I think, almost 2,800 CDs, and then we moved into a very small apartment. so so I had to get rid of them. I didn't get rid of all the CDs. I put them back into the zipper cases that they had sort of gotten out of. I
Mhm.
used to have them in bookcases, you know, in the living room. It was
Yeah.
like a whole centerpiece. But I ended up putting them, you know, getting rid of the jewel cases, throwing them into the folders, and just putting them in storage after carefully ripping them all to my computer.
Mhm.
And over time, I just went full, like, you know, full digital.
Mhm.
Spotify, iTunes, you know, before Spotify, whatever. But now I'm just starting to rebuild my vinyl collection. So somewhere in my
Mhm.
garage, I have a crate full of some of the albums that I kept, you know, from being a kid and stuff.
Oh, cool.
And I have boxes of cassettes some in the garage as well. And I just started to buy albums that I never had to begin with,
Right.
especially
Yeah.
Steely Dan. So I picked up Asia, I picked up Gaucho. You familiar with a band called Marvelous Three?
Yeah, I've heard the name, but I've never listened to them.
Oh, you should check them out. We'll talk about them because they're on my playlist. But I bought their new album when it came out on vinyl. They just put a new record out after, I don't know. I think the last record came out in like 2001 or something. So
Mhm.
like 20 something years, and they
Yeah.
finally reunited and put a new record out, and I was thrilled. So pre-ordered that bad boy and got it on
Mhm.
orange vinyl.
Ooh. I know colored vinyl is always
Yeah.
the way to go. I don't like buying new vinyl because it's expensive and I'm very cheap. But there's specific things that I like I've got a Station to Station by David Bowie, and it's on this translucent orange vinyl, and it's beautiful.
Ooh. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's cool. I just got the reissue of Zeppelin 4, and it's clear vinyl, so that's kind of pretty.
Oh man.
Yeah, I just don't have a record player.
You don't have a record player?
I made this decision.
Man.
I don't. I made the decision to start, building vinyl collection, and I was like, you know what? I'll just have to wait until I really get a hankering to hear something, and I'll just have to, I want to invest and get a decent system and have it someplace where I can like really enjoy it, and I just need to take care of some stuff in the house to make that happen. But soon, soon. So I'm making myself go down that road because I know I'm going to get there.
Yeah. I know. I have a very, very cheap system. My record player, I mean, it's like the entry level Audio Technica, but I mean, it's a good record player. But like my amplifier is a old home sound system from when it's probably 20 years old, and somehow it works. And the speakers I have are two that I bought from the thrift store for maybe $5. So I have a very, very cheap system. I'm trying to save some money so I can buy a better one, because my speakers are going out on me, unfortunately.
Yeah, but the old stuff. Mm-hmm. Oh well, yeah. No, you got to get new ones. But sometimes the old stuff sounds better. I mean, it was just made better. All the solid state components and all that. So
yeah,
cool. So playlists and Queen and mixtapes and everything else. Thank you for making. One of the things that I've been asking guests to do is, come prepared to talk about music, right? Because that's what this is all about. But also in the sort of invitation that I send out, as it's like, hey, send me a playlist, right? Let me take a look at what you're listening to and get a feel for your music taste. So you sent me a great one. Some stuff I know, some artists that I really know, but just don't know the particular tracks that you picked out. Like I think there's slightly deeper cuts, which is kind of cool. But just a great blend. I'm just looking at it right now. So Heart, Little Queen, love that song. Bootsy Collins, Parliament, Flashlight, eternal favorite. Duran Duran, Girls on Film. So like you've really got the classic rock thing nailed, and you're moving out into the whole funk world, and then back around to the '80s. So like I'm digging the flow. And I see you put two Steely Dan songs on, and what's really making me happy is that you picked My Rival. Tell me about that.
Love that song, and I feel like I always get a lot of hate because I like that song. Like, I'm in those Steely Dan groups on Facebook, and they'll, like, every month or so, somebody will post their ranking of Gaucho, and it, like, My Rival is always the last one, or, like, one of the last two. I'm like, it's a great song. I don't understand why I get the hate for that.
I don't get why it gets the hate either. I mean, it starts out with this sort of, almost sinister, like, carousel organ kind of thing, right? And then it just turns into this nasty groove, and it's such a good story song, right? I mean, just the characters in it and how Fagan kind of unwinds it. It's it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favorites too. It's definitely Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say, it's. I think the Gaucho album gets a lot of unwarranted hate from even deep Steely Dan fans.
Yeah, I don't understand why. Like, Gaucho is probably my favorite Steely Dan album just because of the instrumentation and the storylines in the songs. To me, at least, I think that's what makes the album so great. This may be a little out there, but my theory about this album is it's a concept album about 7 different losers, and it takes you like kind of a day in their life and what they do and why they're losers. So I don't know if that's what they were thinking or, just me being a conspiracy theorist, but that's how I see this album.
Yeah, it's the darkest album in their catalog for sure, and I think it's definitely every character is somebody that you just probably don't want to hang out with, right?
Right, yeah.
Definitely got that loser thing going on. So yeah, but it's I mean the circumstances behind the recording of the album. They were sort of at the end of their partnership, and Walter being in the hospital, and getting hit by a car, and his girlfriend ODing, and all that stuff happening. I think it just put a real dark spin on everything.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a conspiracy theory, since you mentioned that. There's a conspiracy theory that they had way better, quote unquote, better songs written that they were going to record, but because this was kind of like a grudge album because of the whole record deal thing with MCA, they said that Fagan sabotaged it and recorded the worst songs that he had in his pocket just to get it out the door. I don't think I believe that, though.
I love that theory because it just seems like something that he would do, but because that's what they say about the second arrangement, that they intentionally erased it so MCA wouldn't make as much money off of the album. I want to believe that theory, but I don't think it's true.
I don't think so either. And if those are the worst songs he had, then they're better than 80% of the other artists out there could ever hope to write. So yeah. Cool. So what do you take into consideration? And we can back up to mixed CDs and mixtapes if you want. But like when you're putting together a collection, who's the audience? Is it sometimes for somebody else? Is it just for you? What's your consideration going into making a mix? Like, do you start with just a song you can't get out of your head and then build it out from there? Like, walk me through that process for you. So
for me, when I make playlists, it's based on moods, I guess. Like, if I'm in a certain mood, like I want a fast pace, like a hype playlist, I guess you would call it. I build my playlist around that, or like times of day almost. Like at night, I want to listen to softer music. Like I don't want to listen to Motley Crue at 10 p.m. So kind of a softer playlist. And then in the mornings, when I'm trying to wake up, I'll listen to that more fast-paced playlist. So it's based on moods and feelings, sort of, not necessarily a specific song to start out, and finding the vibe, like a matching vibe with that song.
Makes sense. Side note before I follow up on that, favorite Motley Crue song?
Either Knock 'Em Dead Kid or Too Fast for Love.
Wow, okay. Both good choices. Livewire is mine. 1,000%.
What a great
I never
song.
get sick of that song.
Yeah. That first album is just phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, the whole thing is great. But Tommy Lee's drum playing on that song, it's fast, it's furious. The meter is way off, but it doesn't matter because it just kicks so much ass.
I play drums, and that's one of my favorite songs to play. I love playing any Motley Crue stuff. Like when I first got into Motley Crue, that kind of was like, oh, I'm going to start playing drums so I can learn how to do all this kind of stuff, like the double bass, and he's got the cowbell and stuff in that song. It's just such a fun song to play. Oh yeah, it's a workout. That song's a workout for sure. All right, so back to the whole playlist thing. I just hear Motley Crue and I'm like, I love Motley Crue, and I don't listen to them nearly enough anymore. So do you intentionally move things around in a playlist because one thing flows better after the other, or do you just go with the mood and just throw stuff in and just let it shuffle? I just let it shuffle. I used to be super big into letting the songs crossfade into each other. And so I'd move them around and be like, oh, this would sound so good going into this one. Or I'll unintentionally do it if I have it on shuffle. I'm like, there was a really cool transition. It was a Steely Dan song that transitioned into a Led Zeppelin song, but I can't remember either of the songs that it was. So I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to find that transition and recreate it.
Yes. I love that when you get the perfect blend.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about you? How do you build your playlists and all that kind of stuff?
Well, it's so funny because Spotify and even iTunes before it really just changed, the way Because, you throw stuff in a playlist and then you can drag it around and change it and sequence it any way you want later and even, change it 6 months after that, right? But
Hmm.
back in the day, making a mixtape or even a mix CD, like you really had to map it out, right? So,
Right.
when I used to make actual cassettes, I used to have like a little notepad and a pen, and I would just sit and write down song names and then just like, cross them out and move one up and cross one out and
Hmm.
move one down. And kind of had to think through like, okay, what's the story I'm trying to tell here, right? If I was making a mix for
Hmm.
myself just to play in the car or something, I wouldn't spend that much time on it. But if I was making a
Yeah.
mix for a friend or a girlfriend or a girl I wanted to be my girlfriend, something like that, then I would put way too much thought into it.
Hmm.
And trying to sort of tell the story through the songs, whether it was lyrically or musically.
Hmm.
Moving into the CD era, same thing. I mean, it was a little easier to move things around because you had to stage all of your files and then, burn them, right? So you had some
Hmm.
time to kind of mess around. You didn't have to do analog one after the other like on tape.
Right.
But I still used to spend a fair amount of time trying to make sure that the songs fit something, right? Whether it was a
Hmm.
vibe or, I wouldn't. And sometimes I would do crazy transitions just because they worked, right? Like they would just be like a
Hmm.
weird set of songs that would just sort of fit together for whatever reason,
Hmm.
thematically. Um, Funny story, and my wife asked me to tell this because I told her we are going to be talking about mixtapes and mix CDs and stuff. But when I was first, we were friends for a bit before we started dating, and when I realized that I kind of wanted to be more than friends, she was kind of seeing some other guy, nothing crazy, but I was a little jealous, and I made her a mix CD, and track one was "I Want to Be Your Lover" by Prince.
Hey, you just gotta get straight to the point.
At the time, I thought it was like a baller move. Looking back now, it's a little bit cringy, but hey, it worked, right? I mean,
It
19
worked.
years
Yeah.
later, and we're still married. So yeah, I mean, I always try to consider, like what the end goal of giving somebody the mix was. I had a couple friends that we would always trade tapes and later CDs and stuff, and it was always more about discovery, right? It was like, oh, you've never
Hmm.
heard this band? Well, let me make you a mixtape with, three or four of their best songs peppered into it or whatever.
Hmm.
And then with the Spotify thing, I'm on Twitter a lot, and I used to do a bunch of these music challenges. I don't know if you're familiar. I feel like Facebook might have something similar if you're
Hmm.
on Facebook. So
Maybe.
people
Yeah.
will post they'll post like a theme for the month, right? So it's like a song with the word blue in it, a song with the word green in it, things like that. Like, and
Yeah.
then you've got to come up with something, and people post at a certain time every night, whatever. So for a while there, I was participating in a lot of those challenges, and I was making playlists based on some of the stuff that I did. So I
Oh,
got
that's
some
cool.
really
Yeah.
cool themes, out of those. Um, I think really my Spotify stuff is, again, it's making people playlists because I want them to hear things that I want them to hear,
Hmm.
right? That I think they need to hear.
Right.
And I
Or
think for
if
me, it's
someone
also
happens to
just
be. Oh no, go ahead.
no, you got
You gotta make your playlist, and because if somebody's following you, they gotta think you're cool and stuff like that. It's all just for other people. It's not for yourself.
that's right, absolutely. Yeah, and then for myself, it's just I have the one that I sent you is I've been doing these things called like Chad's picks or I think the current series I'm on is curated favorites, and what it is like it's my kind of placeholder for discovery, right? So when I find a cool song that I never heard before, something new, somebody turns me on to a new artist or whatever, I'll throw something into that playlist. If I'm just in the car and Spotify's on shuffle and it's throwing me random stuff, some deep cut that I knew 20 years ago might come on, and I'm like, wow, I haven't heard that song in a long time. So
Hmm.
I'll throw it on my playlist so I can go back to it. And that's what I've been doing with those. And then when each one of those gets up to about, I think 200, 250 songs, I just start a new one so they don't get too unwieldy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and the other thing I think, with the mixtapes, I actually dug out a bunch of old cassettes, just came across them in a box, and took it upon myself to take pictures and scan the inserts, because not only, and I don't know if you did this with CDs, I did it with CDs, but it started with tapes. I used to make custom covers for everything. Like I would sit and
Yeah.
go through magazines and cut out pictures and get a glue stick and just like make collages and all kinds
Mhm.
of fun stuff. So did you ever do any of that with mix CDs?
No, I never did that sort of thing. That was kind of after, like, when I was growing up, like, we didn't really make CDs. That was kind of at the start of the MP3 player era. So that was a little
Right.
before me. My dad used to do that. Like he would make stuff
Got it.
online and print it out and stick it in the CD case.
Yeah. Oh, that's fun. I think it's part of the whole thing. Um, yeah. So I don't know. Is there anything else you want to talk about in terms of bands you're listening to right now? Anything new? Anything old?
Uh,
What's on your mind?
I've been doing a deep dive into Brian Eno at the moment. I've been a Roxy Music fan for a
Huh.
long time, and one of my favorite movies of all time is Velvet Goldmine, with Christian Bale, and it has a phenomenal soundtrack. And I listened to "Babies on Fire" from Brian Eno's "Here Comes the Warm Jets," and I was like, I need to listen to this album all the way through. So I listened to that one, and I'm trying to make my way through his entire discography. And then it gets a little weird kind of in the late 70s, early 80s, but I'm still trying to push through and listen to it.
Is that when he started to go like real electronic and was working with Robert Fripp
Yeah.
and that whole scene?
Yeah, yeah, doing
Yeah.
the ambience music kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, I could never get into that kind of stuff. I mean, I appreciate it, I respect it, but I just like I don't purposely go put it on and listen to it. Maybe if it's in the
Right.
background.
Yeah, something like that, but I'm not gonna, you know, try and do something else while listening to it. I'll listen to something else that is a little more interesting or engaging, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But tell me about some of your cassettes. What were some of the songs on them?
Oh, let me pull up the one that I was talking about with you before we started recording. So even back in the day, if I was making all the ones that I found that I posted were ones that I made for myself, and a couple of them were more for convenience because I didn't have a CD player in my car,
Mm-hmm.
but I had a subscription to CMJ New Music Monthly magazine back in the day, and it used to come with
Mm-hmm.
an actual disc, right? So they would give you a
Right.
sampler of like 15 songs or whatever, and it was a lot of fun because that was how you discovered music before the internet. So I mean, it was one of the ways that I discovered music before the internet. So what I used to do is, pop the disc in, listen, find the songs that I liked, and then I would just grab those and throw them on a tape so I could play them in the car.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that also sort of evolved into me just, okay, dubbing other stuff off of other tapes or CDs because, hey, I want to listen to this today or whatever. And I would just build up a tape over time, not planned out necessarily, and just throw stuff on and see what stuck. But this one I thought was a pretty good amalgam, of all different things. So side A leads off with Nasty Girl by Vanity Six. Still one of the nastiest grooves I think ever.
Yeah.
Prince obviously wrote it and produced it, and I think he played all the instruments on it too. Love me some Prince.
Mm-hmm.
Then I spin off into "It Was a Good Day" by Ice Cube. And again, like this is not a good example of sequencing. This is just random shit thrown on a tape,
Yeah.
But "Thieves Like Us" by New Order
Ooh, good one.
is the third track. And then it's a B-side that's my favorite Cure song ever called "Too Late." It's the number two, "Late." Are you into the Cure at all?
A little bit. I've got a couple of their cassettes. I need to sit down and listen to them. One of my listeners at the radio station, he's a huge fan, and so every week he'll try and request a Cure song that I've more than likely never heard. He's like, I'm going to turn you into a big fan of theirs eventually.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing. They're one of my
Yeah.
favorite bands, I think, and it's something that started in the '80s when I was in high school, and um, yeah, I still go back to some of their early stuff, and it's just great. So I think this one was 1993, this tape. So then we're into like post grunge kind of stuff, like Paul Westerberg, Sonic Youth. Um, what else is on there? Smashing Pumpkins. But then I kind of take a left turn and pick up the pieces by Average White Band. Um, classic tune there. Looking for Clues by Robert Palmer. Are you familiar?
Yeah, that's a good song.
Yeah, great track. And then Izzy Stradlin from Guns N'
From
Roses
Guns
did
N'
a
Roses,
solo
yeah.
album. Um, yeah, and he had a single out called "Shuffle It All," and it's just a great song. It's just a blatant Rolling Stones ripoff, but why not?
Right.
Let's see. Then we go into some Lenny Kravitz, some Jane's Addiction, Jimmy Olsen's Blues by Spin Doctors. Spin Doctors retroactively seem to get a lot of hate. Like people just look back on them as like this, pseudo jam band kind of thing. And I don't know why.
Hmm.
I always kind of liked them.
Yeah, that was a little before my time. I say that, uh, but yeah, I never really listened to them. I knew what's their big song called? The one that like everybody
Uh,
knows.
oh, Little Miss Can't Be Wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why they get so much retroactive hate, but okay. And then U2, The Fly. I don't know why I picked that particular track off that album, but Octung Baby is one of my favorite albums ever. And I
Hmm.
think it's probably my favorite U2 album.
Yeah, it's a good one. I'm not a big U2 fan, but I appreciate them. I understand why people like them.
Yeah, that album was just such a turning point for them. It was, really different. I mean, it sounded like nothing they had done before. I think, I kind of got turned off by them a little bit with Joshua Tree. I felt like it was just Bono being pompous for 45 minutes. you
Thank
know,
you. I have the
There's some
same
good music
opinion
on
of
the
that
album.
album.
Yeah, I mean, I think, he got just a little bit too full of himself. The music is fabulous, like the playing, and I'll die on this hill that Larry Mullen Jr. and Adam Clayton, the bass player, they're one of the most solid rhythm sections in any rock band. I mean, if you just listen to
Hmm.
them play live, they are just locked in and they can just hold it down.
Yeah.
But Bono just for a while there, it was just like, okay, dude,
Yeah.
you know. But then he kind of came back with Octung Baby and just went over the top and started sort of making fun of himself, and it was like, okay, he gets it. So then it
Hmm.
was they kind of pulled me back in a little bit. Let's see. And then I wrap up with Seasons by Chris Cornell. You know that one?
I do not know that one. So,
Okay. That one you need to go listen to.
all right.
Great song, and Chris Cornell's voice was just unmatched. And
Hmm.
he did it. I think it was on the soundtrack for the movie Singles.
Hmm.
Um, so it was like one of his only solo things of that era. And then I think he ended up coming out with his own albums, later or
Hmm.
whatever. Um, and then I end off with Evangeline by Matthew Sweet, which is another great '90s album if you haven't heard it.
Hmm. That's a pretty cool. It the one that I made. I wasn't sure if ours would overlap at all, but none of none of what we did overlapped. Now that I'm looking back at the track listing.
Yeah, which is funny because I like so much of the stuff that was on your playlist. So
Hmm.
and this again, this is just one example. But looking at the playlist that I sent you to, there's a couple of highlights. Let's see. So Lazy Nina by Greg Gaines. I wasn't even
That's such a
aware of
great
this
song.
song until a few months ago. Right? And Fagan wrote it and I think plays on it, and or maybe he doesn't play on it, but he basically gave it to Greg Gaines because Greg did such a great job. He played most of the keyboards or all the keyboards or whatever on Nightfly, right?
Hmm.
looking through to see what else is standing out to me right now.
You've got some
James
Beatles
Gang. Are
on
you a
there.
James Gang fan?
I am, yeah. I'm a huge Joe
I
Walsh
do.
fan in general.
Hmm. I was really into some Joe Walsh stuff in college and right after. So like Life's Been Good and Rocky Mountain Way, like those are just
Hmm.
evergreen album rock, sing along in the car
Yeah.
kind of songs. And I didn't make the connection with James Yang until much later. And Funk 49 is just an evergreen tune for me. Like it still shows up on playlists every once in a while. But they have a song called The Bomber,
Hmm.
and it's kind of like a medley, and it's 7 minutes long. Had no idea, right? Every band in the '70s, I think, had something like this where they would just mash two or three different songs together and make one long track out of it. But
Hmm.
it's great, and it made my playlist. Let's see what else. Are you into Frank Zappa at all?
I am. Yeah, I'm in the beginning stages, so I just like Titties and Beer and Punky's Whips. Those are the two songs that I really really like at the moment. And of course, as a
Nice.
drummer,
My
I love Terry
playlist.
Bozzio.
Oh God, yes. Everybody in his bands, especially the live bands, were like top-notch musicians. Like you think
Hmm.
Steely Dan were bad about, like pushing studio musicians to their limits. I think Zappa was like, just a taskmaster, right? At least all the
Yeah.
stories that I've read. But it worked. It worked
Hmm.
because I think he got the best performances out of people. And Terry Bozzio, like people only really know him for what was the '80s band he was
Missing
in with
Persons.
Dale Bozzio? Yes, Missing Persons. I love that stuff. A
I
lot of
do
people hate
too.
on it
It's
because it's
great.
that
Yeah.
yeah.
But it's the time and the place. It takes you back to that very, very specific moment in music when that's just what the sound was.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see what else. Brian Carlock, who I'm sure you know. I
Hmm.
guess his wife put a record out recently.
Hmm.
I had no idea, but I think he posted about it. I want to say on his Instagram, so I went and listened to it, and it's a pretty decent song. So I threw it on my
Hmm.
playlist for later. Um, what are your feelings on country music?
I really like 90s country music, and I like George Jones and Johnny Cash, but I really like 90s cuz that's what my mom liked when she was in high school, so then we listened to it when I was a kid. But yeah,
Right.
I don't like modern country music cuz at the station group that I work for, we're over four different stations that have very differing music genres. And so one of them is a country station, and when we schedule them and have to listen to them, it's all of that new country, and it's just terrible. Like the lyrics are super cheesy, and just my dad and I make fun of it because every modern country song has like the same three or four elements in it. Like they have to talk about Yeti coolers, trucks, and mud. That's how you make a country song now.
Yep. 1,000%. I love that. Yeah, same. I mean, I'm not a big country fan except for classic stuff like George Jones and, like you said, Johnny Cash. I was asking because a couple days ago, I'm still building this particular playlist, and I was listening to Cake, the Fashion Nugget album, and they do a cover of Sad Songs and Waltzes by Willie Nelson.
Hmm.
And I was listening to their version, and I was like, God, I haven't heard the Willie Nelson version in forever. So I went and dug that up on Spotify and threw it in there. It's such a good song.
Hmm. One of my favorite Willie Nelson albums, he does an album of American standard covers like Sunny Side of the Street, Someone to Watch Over Me, and it's a phenomenal album. He does a great job with them. So if you haven't listened to that album, I would highly check it out.
Is that the one where it's kind of him and he plays a lot of like jazz guitar?
Kind of. It has a little bit more of a country twang to it, but it's still, you can tell that these
Okay.
are supposed to be like jazz songs.
Right. No, I'm asking because Willie Nelson is one of the most underrated guitar players. I mean, if you just sit and listen to him play, he's just unreal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
his chord voicings and a lot of the stuff that he wrote in the guise of country songs, like it just has like classical and jazz undertones to it. It's
Mm-hmm.
amazing. But it's so many artists are just underappreciated for certain things because they get
Mm-hmm.
famous for something else.
Right. Yeah, like I think that Joe Perry is a very underrated guitar player. Like, people love Aerosmith, but I think when a lot of people think of Aerosmith, they think of their late 80s, 90s stuff and not their first like 3 or 4 albums, which are phenomenal albums.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
they
a big
really are.
fan of
And he was like the
Oh no, go ahead.
no, you got.
Like those first 3 or 4 albums are just absolutely outstanding. They like their debut is really good. Get Your Wings is really good, and his guitar playing is just you know people don't talk about it enough, in my opinion, at least.
Oh, I agree. And not only his lead guitar work, but like he's just I don't know who wrote what in the band, but I'm assuming he brought a lot of the riffs to the table because they're just great riffs. Like I mean, they're
Mm-hmm.
so everything's so catchy with Aerosmith.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. I think like their '80s stuff, they got real sort of power ballady and
Mm-hmm.
right. Yeah, it's funny. I was just reading an article. I forget where it was or what the actual topic was, but they were digging into how metal kind of died. Traditional metal sort of died in the late '80s or the early '90s with all the glam rock stuff and like
Mm-hmm.
Poison and Warrant and even some of the harder bands had to compete and do like these power ballads and like sort of cheesy songs to get on the radio and
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, it's like grunge didn't take over. It was just people stopped listening to everything else.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
very odd. Me and my dad have this um theory that Skid Row's debut album was really the push towards grunge, because I wouldn't consider that like a metal or a hair metal album. It has, I think, some of those early grunge influences to me. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think they had a lot of punk energy to them.
Mm
And I think Sebastian Bach wasn't really a metal singer. I mean, like, or he didn't want. I don't think that was his first thing.
hmm.
I
Mm hmm.
feel like if I remember correctly, reading about him and seeing interviews, he was like a theater kid,
Yeah.
right? So, or he was in a choir or something like that. So I mean, like, I don't
Mm
think like he came up as wanting to be this rock star. He kind of stumbled into it.
hmm.
But
Mm
yeah, no, they definitely had a grungier sound to them for sure.
hmm. Mm hmm. So when was the last time
All
you
right,
made
great. Well, is
like
there anything
a
else you wanted to? Oh,
when was the last time you made like a physical mixtape or like CD or cassette? I'm just curious since you're getting back into physical media.
yeah, no, that's a great question. I couldn't tell you the last CD I made. Probably when my wife and I got married. We got married like in December. So I, as a wedding favor, made everybody a Christmas CD, like
Oh,
a
that's cool.
classic standard Christmas song CD, and I designed a cover for the CD that had um, the place we got married. They had like a brochure or something that had like this really cool artistic rendering of the building with like snow and stuff on it. So I used that and I photoshopped our names into it, and it came out. If I say so myself, it came out really nice. And we wrapped them up and gave them to people as a favor. So that was 2004. um, Probably in the couple years after that, I might have made a few more, but I think my CD making was limited to giving them out at parties or making them for special occasions for people because a lot of people at that point still weren't going digital and still wanted physical media. So I was, kind of forced to burn CDs if I wanted to share music with,
Hmm.
you know, grandfathers and uncles and aunts and those types of folks. So, I think we did one for my wife's grandfather's 90th birthday. And I made a mix CD of just all stuff from his era, all his favorite songs, and we made copies for everybody. And I'm actually admitting to piracy on YouTube right now, but it's okay. But yeah, I mean that's what we did. So I think I gotta say it was 2005, 2006. I'm gonna guess.
Hmm. Cool. You think you're gonna get back into it?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm definitely when I build this system that I'm planning on for for vinyl, I'm definitely gonna buy a CD player. I have a cassette deck, so I'm gonna be able to play all my tapes at some point. But since I have so many CDs, I would love to probably move them back into jewel cases so I can get to them so I can actually take them out and play them without having to go through all the books. So we'll see.
Hmm. Well, cool, cool.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else you wanted to cover? Anything else on your mind?
Um, I think that's it. This is the only mixtape that I've ever made. I made it for a one of my cousins. She lives in Oklahoma, and I made it for her, and I never sent it to her. I was gonna mail it to her, and it just slipped my mind, so I still have it. And I dated it. It was let's see, June 12th, 2022, and I have the set list or the track listing is it's an odd track listing. Like the A side, I tried to make it themed. Like the A side is more well known songs, and the B side was like you may not have heard these songs before. They're kind of weird. They're kind of out there, or they're deep cuts from well known artists on some of them. But it was a cool. I still listen to it every now and then. I ordered a Walkman last night in my late night eBay viewings. If I stay up too late, I'll end up ordering stuff off of eBay that I don't need.
Cool. So what's on the tape? You want to give me some tracks?
Sure. So on side A, it opens with "I Can't Go for That" by Hall and Oates.
Excellent
Then
choice.
"Stiletto" by Billy Joel, "Fool in the Rain," Zeppelin, "You Might Think," The Cars, "Good Girls Don't" by The Knack, "Killer Queen," "Never Tear Us Apart," "In Excess," "Living Thing," ELO, "Young Americans," David Bowie, and it ends with "Life's Been Good." Then side B kicks off
Oh,
with "When I'm With You" by Sparks, "Too Shy" by Kajagoogoo, "Love Is the Drug," Roxy Music, "Love My Way," Psychedelic Furs, "On the Loose," Saga, "Word on the Wing," David Bowie, "Big Log," Robert Plant, "Hungry for You," The Police, and then I end it with "The Golden Slumbers Carry That Weight," The End by the Beatles.
nice. Excellent. I love and just I think the left field song to me on that tape is "Too Shy" by Kaja Gugu, but it works. Like it fits.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that song. I heard it in a movie. It was do you remember that Netflix movie where it was the interactive one? And it was the where the guy was making the video game where you could choose your own adventure.
Yeah, it was like the Black Mirror thing or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I heard that song in
Yeah,
that movie
yeah.
for the first time, and I'm like, wow, this is great. So I've been a fan of theirs ever since.
Nice. So are you eventually gonna get that out in the mail?
I think so, maybe. This might be the time to do it now that I think about it. I'll finally get her a
And
mixtape that I
speaking of
made for
Billy,
her.
you should. I think she'd appreciate it. That was the other thing about mixtapes is like when somebody made you one, it was like, wow, you spent all this time doing this for me. That's so
Hmm.
cool. Speaking of Billy Joel, did you hear that he's got a new single about to come out?
Yes, I'm very excited about it. It'll be his first new song since 1993. I'm very excited
Yeah, I know.
because River of Dreams isn't really my thing. I'm a big early Billy Joel fan, so I'm not too big on Stormfront or that last album.
Same. What's your favorite
Hmm.
Billy Joel album?
Woo.
Yeah, I know.
Uh,
Hard decision.
Either 52nd Street or An Innocent Man. It may be An Innocent Man. I
Okay.
love that album.
Yeah, it's solid, and talk about a concept album like that. That just
Mm-hmm.
ticks all the boxes.
Yeah.
I have to go Glass Houses for mine, or
Ah, the
Turnstiles.
rock
It's between.
album.
Yeah, oh, the rock album. That's right. Or Turnstiles, because
Mm-hmm.
Turnstiles was just such a sort of curveball from him. It was
Mm-hmm.
just a random collection of stuff, I feel like, but to me they all worked. And again, it was one of those first albums that I think I had when I was a kid. So holds a special place because I probably listened to it so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Turnstiles is a good album, and he had just moved back to New York, or he was in the process of moving to New York, so he was in a different mindset than his first couple of albums. So it's an interesting one to listen to, considering what was going on in his private life at the time.
Yeah, oh, for sure. All right, well, cool. Hey, this has been great. I
Yeah,
think we can, yeah, unless there's anything else you wanted to talk about, I think we can wrap it up.
yeah, I believe that's it for me. Thank you for
All
having
right.
me on. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, same here. And thank you for joining. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah.
And anything you want to plug, your podcast, your show?
Oh, you can listen to my podcast. It's called Reagan's Rewind, where my co-host Anthony Craven and we take an album from the 70s or 80s. We trade off each week, and we go through the track listing, do the album charts, singles charts, reviews, all that kind of stuff, and just dissect it. So our next episode is the Mothership Connection by Parliament, so I'm very excited about it.
Good one. Love that album. I can't wait to hear it.
Oh, well,
I
thank
will be
you. Thank you.
subscribing.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Hopefully some of you out there will
Of
too.
course. Yeah, well, let's get the word out.
Yeah.
Great. So thanks again.
Yeah.
Wonderful talking to you, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.